So thank you all for joining us today. This session is going to be getting your board ready to raise money. I'm joined by Wendy and Steph at Nonprofit SideKick. And my name is Matt. I'm with MonkeyPod. We're a software provider for nonprofits. This is not meant to be a sales pitch or anything like that. This is hopefully just some useful information for you all to learn. And I'm excited for Wendy and Steph to share their expertise with you. So Wendy, Steph, I'll pass the mic to you.
All right, great. Thanks, Matt. I'm going to share my screen and then we'll do a few introductions and then we'll just dive into the presentation and there will be Q&A at the end, but you can also put stuff in the chat. If you have questions along the way, Matt will be checking the chat and making sure that we answer any questions along the way if needed. So let me share my screen. All right, so we're here to talk about boards and fundraising. We're going to do a little bit of a dive from the nuts and bolts side, as well as from the heart and soul side of running nonprofits and fundraising. Let's see if I can, there we go. My name is Wendy Bertner, and I'm one half of Nonprofit SideKick. I am the nuts and bolts half of it. I've run organizations for over 30 years now. Coming out of the operations side, all different kinds of organizations, from human services to arts to economic development. I ran a corporate foundation for a while. And fun fact about me is I was on the startup team of GuideStar, which is now part of Candid. And my partner in crime is Stephanie Masters. Steph, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to meet everyone here virtually. So I'm the other half of Nonprofit SideKick, and I have almost 30 years in organizational psychology, organizational leadership on the HR side. So I'm an executive coach, and with Wendy, we do a lot around developing leaders to lead nonprofits. So Wendy's going to speak to the process and the framework around fundraising, and I'm going to talk about the relationship side of it.
Okay, so quick hint before we get started. Steph's stuff is the stuff you really need to listen to today. I have good stuff too, but so let's start out kind of really going back to basics and talking about why do nonprofits have boards? I think a lot of times we don't pause when we're running nonprofits, or if there are board members on this call today as well. And I know a lot of us do both. We might run a nonprofit and then be on the boards of other nonprofits. But it is set up by our government. If we are considered public charities, most of us, maybe not everybody on the call. And just by virtue of the fact that we are a public entity, then the government says, well, you have to have an independent board of directors to kind of be the go-between between what's happening in the organization and the government. And so for one reason that we have boards is that public accountability, like that is the main thing the government wants us to have boards for, is that their boards are the ones that are accountable to the government and to the public, therefore to the public. Transparency, because we are, again, public entities, we have to abide by a level of transparency, and the government and the public kind of looks to the board to say, hey, make sure that your organization is transparent about what it's doing, because a lot of the money that we're dealing with is tax exempt money. So our government wants us to take care of it, and they want to take care of the taxpayers. Providing oversight, the same idea, making sure that your organization is well run. That is clearly, a responsibility of the board. Fundraising, some people say yes, some people say no. It can be a little bit of what do you want to call it? It will start conversations in some boards, whether or not the board actually should be fundraising or not. We're going to talk today as if this is something your organization is doing, it needs, expects from its board. So I do recognize there are many nonprofits out there that the board is not expected to fundraise, but we are going to move ahead and talk as if everybody on the call understands this and this is what they are doing, that the board is actually fundraising. So the fifth thing is fiduciary responsibilities, and it's kind of reflects all the 4 points above. So what is a fiduciary? It's a person that acts on behalf of another person or organization with a legal and ethical obligation to put that organization's interests ahead of their own. Now, being in the sector for 30 years, I have run into people that don't understand that this is their role, and they don't always put the organization's interests ahead of their own. And they have to be reminded of it. So if you're going through that, or if you've gone through that, I can completely relate to that. So board members are fiduciaries. They have an obligation. What are their duties? These are kind of the legal fiduciary duties. Number one is duty of care. They need to take care of the organization. And it applies to our double bottom line, the mission, the purpose. They need to make sure that the organization is upholding that, as well as finances or sustainability, that the organization is, the money is well managed and transparent about it. The second is the duty of loyalty. And this is where, when they come to the table as the board member, they're wearing the hat of a board member, so to speak, that the decisions they're making, the way they are participating in running the organization, they're putting the organization's needs first, not their needs, not their employer's needs, not their family needs, what have you. It has to be the organization's needs first. The third is duty of obedience. And this is talking about the organization following laws, following regulations, following the mission and purpose. If you are a local chapter of a national organization, you might have some additional responsibilities around obedience. There might be some rules that you have to follow with them as well. So this is kind of a heavy load for board members. And, some board members look at this and say, I don't see fundraising in there anywhere. But then you can kind of go back to this duty of care and listen, if the organization is going to be sustainable, they have to understand that the business model of a nonprofit requires fundraising, not just a sales or a business attitude, a transactional attitude. You have to understand how to do fundraising for a good percentage of the nonprofits in the United States. This is really important. And that's kind of why we're here. It's also important, not only do they have to understand their fiduciary duties when they come on board, but they have to understand that this is a governing board, not an advisory board. Now, you may have an advisory board. You may want the advisory board to do some fundraising, but that's not really what we're talking about today. You can use some of the same tips and tricks we're going to talk to you about, but we're really focused on your governing board, just to be very clear. And we understand that there are a lot of board members that get on board. They don't understand their fiduciary duties. They don't understand their governing board, and they kind of sit back and they say, well, you know what you should do. And those are the people that can be the hardest to get to fundraise or participate in fundraising in some way as well. So we're going back to basics because I feel, and Steph agrees with me, I think that it's really important that board members understand some of these basics, that they understand their legal obligations when they're coming on a board. And if fundraising is part of that, then that's important for them to understand before they even get on the board, that this is going to be a responsibility you're asking them to do. So that leads us to roles or expectations that organizations may have of their board member. So one is a team member and a mission expert. Two is an ambassador. So start internally and then go external and talk about the organization. They need to be a financial leader. They need to understand the finances of the organization, and then they can be a really good fundraiser. Okay, so let's break each of those down. Number one, team member, mission expert. Board members should take the time to learn about the organization, its goals, strategies, priorities, really becoming a mission expert for the organization. We all know there are organizations out there that sound like they do the same thing. Maybe they are looking at the same mission area. I ran a breast cancer organization for a while, and we really focused on advocacy and lobbying, not on support groups. So we had to make sure when board members were coming in that they understood we're not doing support groups. We are doing this advocacy and lobbying. We meet with lawmakers, all of that. They had to understand how we worked before, we wanted them on our board. This is very important. A team member also takes the time to build relationships with staff or volunteers or other board members, whatever your structure might be. They need to learn about them personally and professionally in order to be an effective board member. This is a team thing. You have to get on the team. You have to be play well with others in the sandbox, so to speak. They have to consider themselves part of the team. I used to do this when I was running organizations. People would come on board, and over time, you could see something clicked and they started using the we language, and they stopped saying, you know what you should do, or some version of that. And they started saying, well, we have this issue. We have this problem. We should solve it this way. And then they start to really become part of the cause, part of how are we really making the world a better place using our mission. Then they really get involved and they can look for ways to innovate, flex, pivot that best suit the organization, right? They have to get all of this information. Can be a really strong learning curve, a really sharp learning curve. But it's important that as board members come on board to the organization, that they have this information, that they understand what the organization is doing, how it's doing it, and how they fit into it. So once they kind of have all of that, then they can turn externally and become a great ambassador. Okay, occasionally you will have one of those board members who have the right personality, that they're an ambassador from the get-go. Great, fantastic. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm talking to the majority of the other board members who first they have to get their feet wet. They have to kind of figure things out. But you know this is happening when you can see that they're proud of the affiliation, right? They're talking about the organization to others. They're telling stories. They're repeating stories you've told them or that they've heard in other ways. And they're really out there saying, this is a great organization. They start sharing social media posts. Sometimes this takes a while. Sometimes they kind of sit back and they're not real sure. How do I do this? I'm not sure if I want to show people that I'm affiliated with this organization. But once they start to feel really good about it, they'll start to externally show that they are part of this organization. They're going to show up. Authentic supporter of the mission. This word authentic will come up a couple of times in our presentation today. So if figuring that out is important, what makes them click. And that's more of what Steph's going to talk about. But making sure that they're an authentic supporter of the mission is probably one of the most important things that if you're a staff person that you can, or a board, that you can do for board members. So they're out there talking. One of the first things people are going to ask them when they find out they're affiliated with any nonprofit is going to be, well, where do you get your money from? How much do you spend on overhead? They're going to have all these kind of fun questions that we all, love or hate them. They come up. So it's important that they know and understand the numbers and financial reports. And when we do this presentation to boards, we really underscore this, that even if you hate spreadsheets, you hate financial reports, you need to find some way that you can get in there and understand at the very basic, how's money coming in? How is it going out? What does that look like? How much of it goes where? And has some of those basic answers. They can just be bullet points, but they need to know, no matter, again, whether they have any problem, let's say, with spreadsheets, or if they love it. As a financial leader, when they start to really understand it, they're going to start looking ahead. They're going to look at cash flow. They're going to plan for reserves. They're going to want the organization to be financially secure and healthy. And this happens more often that the board is kind of saying, whoa, 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 we need to save. We need to look at our cash flow. When are we going to run out of money? That's part of their job, and they should have all the information to do that, and they should be part of those discussions. We all know we have to present a budget every year, or most of us do. And it can be very frustrating. I'm not going to lie to you guys here. That was one of the most frustrating things, is putting so much time and effort into preparing a budget only to have some random board member who hardly ever shows up ask 80 million questions when we present it and try to get it approved. And it can be head banging off the desk, frustrating, and I get it, but it's important that they are looking at the budget. They are responsible. They're the ones that are signing your 990. They're the ones that are telling the different governments that we report to that, this organization is well run. So it's important that they know and understand that. And we always tell board members, and I'm going to tell you as well, know when you're ready to staff that financial management. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to put down bookkeepers by saying but bookkeepers are great. But at some point, you really need to get people that are looking at the numbers, looking at the cash flow and saying, okay, how are we doing this? And if your board does not have people like that, it might be that you have to hire a professional. And again, even if it's just a few hours a month on contract, somebody who can help everybody get to know and become really strong financial leaders. For some executive directors or senior managers, they can do this and that's great. Some board members do this and that's great. So it's kind of knowing when you need that extra support, that professional level extra support. So that's how we get to fundraising, right? So those are the steps. We need to make sure that our board members have those, the heart, the soul, they love it, they have the passion for the organization, but they also understand what's happening with our programs and with our finances. So some of the ways that boards can get involved with fundraising is, first of all, make a personal donation that's meaningful to them. That almost every organization should have that in their board expectations. We all know that there are funders out there that say, we're not going to give to you if you don't have 100% board participation. I think the majority of nonprofits are considered small to medium size. So our boards are not necessarily the multi-million billionaires. So we often say, make a personal donation that's meaningful to you. The other way, well, there are several ways, as you're going to see. We have 2 pages on boards and fundraising. I have 2 pages on boards and fundraising. Board members can make strategic introductions into their networks. Where do they have other people? Do they work somewhere where they're working around other people? Do they belong to some sort of professional group? Do they belong to a chamber of commerce? Things like this, they can make strategic introductions to the network for the organization. They can even go a step further and host small gatherings, sharing the story, connecting to the mission, doing a little fundraising, and making sure people know that this is a little fundraising gathering, not, hey, come on over to my house for, drinks, and then you surprise them and say, guess what, we're going to ask you for money. That is never going to work. Please don't do that. But board members can host a little gathering, whether it's at their house, at their place of work, whatever, share the stories, connect to the mission, and then somebody on staff or some other board member, it doesn't have to be them, can actually ask for the donations. I think one of the most important things they can do is educate their network, their family, their friends on the importance of your organization, not just that it exists, not just that you have this mission, but what's really important about your organization. Why is it so important to your community, to our community, our state, whatever your reach is? Why is it so important? They need to really understand that so that they can talk to other people about it. You want to make sure that they have some very specific success stories. And sometimes it takes them coming to your site, seeing what you're doing, really feeling it. Just telling them stories sometimes doesn't quite, you'll know when they're kind of the lights are going on. But it's important that they have those to tell, that they can kind of feel it and make it their own. Really important that your board understands how, where, when you fundraise. Not all organizations are the same. Some do a whole lot of events, some do no events, right? Some do grants, some don't do any grants. So it's really important that your board understands. This kind of goes back to that financial leader, but taking it a step further, right? What's the best way for our organization to fundraise? How are we doing this? And the really basic thing that they can do, even, I'm an introvert. I know it's hard to tell, but I'm an introvert. And when I get on a board, I don't want to immediately be asking my friends and family for money, but I will pick up the phone and make a thank you call to any donor and say, thank you for your $25. I mean, that's easy for people to do. You're thanking them. You're telling them how much you appreciate their support. Easy peasy. It's like a 2-minute phone call. And this is also a way that you can introduce new board members or people who aren't quite ready to fundraise. They're kind of, I don't know if I want to do this. If they'll write thank you notes or make thank you calls to get started, that's a very, very, very important part of that fundraising process, as you probably already know. So some kind of, tips for it. It's really important that authenticity is key. It's very important that they are authentic. If you've ever been pitched something by somebody that you could just absolutely tell is either reading from a script or they've memorized the script, it never works very well. They have to feel it. So if you're staff or another board member, you have to make sure all of your board members feel it and they can be authentic, right? They need to go at fundraising, as we all do, but we forget that the people on our board haven't been trained or haven't come up in the nonprofit sector to understand that fundraising is about building relationships, not preparing the perfect sales pitch, because fundraising is different from sales. Not very often is it transactional, meaning I'm thinking about, is this worth it to me? When I think about buying yet another coffee mug, I have to think about, is it worth the $5 or the $25 if it's a beautiful handmade one? I have to make that decision in my head. It's a little bit of a different decision when I'm thinking, do I want to give this organization money, right? I'm not really getting anything returned. So I need to feel a relationship there in some way. There used to be a time, and I hope people aren't doing this anymore, but when you joined a board, within the first year, the development director or the ED would say, give me 5 contacts. I'll reach out to them for you. And that seemed like a way to kind of let boards off the hook in a way. But I've talked to a lot of board members in my 30 years, and I don't know anybody who is fully comfortable with that. So I found that it's easier for board members to go through this process we're talking about, really getting to know it, making it personal and authentic, and then they're ready to start pulling people in. And that's where your professional staff can make the ask. Once they have people they've already told the story, they're bringing them in. You don't want to be the first one to be like, hey, Joe gave me your name, thought you'd be interested in giving to our organization. That's very difficult for everybody. So the board member may not do the ask, but they should be part of the strategy and the conversation around the ask. Again, it shouldn't be you saying, hey, give me 5 contacts, and then going away and contacting the contacts. There should be a conversation. There should be a strategy. They'll be able to tell you, this person does this. This is going to pull at their heartstring or whatever that might be. So the board has to be part of that. How are we reaching out to our friends and family? Again, I don't think a staff person should do it. I think the board person should do it. The connection should do it. And then the staff person can kind of be in the background ready to kind of make that ask. This last one might be the most important thing. And this is something that I realized as I started to get on boards myself and started to talk to board members about fundraising. If a board member is not comfortable that the organization will be a good steward for their network, they're not going to refer their network. They're not going to ask their network. They're not going to pull their network in. It's going to look bad on them. And so they won't do it. I wouldn't do it, right? I mean, I've been part of boards that were in financial crisis when they really needed money. And it was really hard for me to go to my network and say, hey, I'm with an organization that really needs money, right? I had to feel good. I had to see the plan. Like, okay, if we raise money to get over this crisis, what's going to happen? It can't be crisis after crisis after crisis, because my contacts, I'm not going to handle that well. That's not where I want to be. So making sure that your board member understands that authenticity is key, that they're building relationships, not doing a sales pitch with their friends and family, that you're going to incorporate them into the strategy, that you're going to have discussions around how are you going to reach their network, and that they feel super comfortable that the organization will be a good steward for your network, for the money that their friends are going to give, that you're going to be really strong there and you're going to do good things with their money. So board members need the nuts and bolts. Board members need to understand their fiduciary duties and responsibilities, and these may be different for different organizations. So you have to make sure that they get it for your organization. They need to understand that they are the governing body, not an advisory board, that they are in it, man. Like, they are in it. The buck stops with the board. So they better be involved with how the money's coming in. that they understand how they can be the best team member, ambassador, financial leader, and how all of that fuels the fundraising, right? I'm going to emphasize number 3 again, how they can be the best team member. That's individual. Not everybody is going to do the same things. You're going to have a diverse group of people sitting around the table, getting ready to fundraise. So this is where I hand it over to Steph, and she starts talking about the heart and soul of being a great board member and fundraiser. Steph?
Okay, great. So yeah, wonderful. So when we work with boards, one of the things that we like to do is make sure that each of the board members are connected in a really meaningful way. And it's first understanding what their why is. Why do they care? So there's lots of organizations that we've worked with where board members were parents of children that received programming, or they had parents involved in programming, or they were involved in it themselves. And so the first thing that we need to do in terms of building these strong relationships within the board is understanding, where does their motivation come from? Why do they care? Or why do they volunteer? What is it about the organization that draws them in? And so being able to link it back to, what is your mission? How many people do you want to serve? How many programs do you want to create? And then talking about what excites you. What are you most proud of? We worked with a school that uh, did great advocacy and special programming for children on the spectrum. And so one of the best things that the executive director did is walk all of the board members around the school and told these great success stories and talked about individual children that were positively impacted by their programming. They got to see their artwork. They got to see how the modifications of the classroom were made to make sure that they were sensory friendly. And this made them so proud of the organization that it was so much easier for them to go out and either be an ambassador or do the fundraising or introduce them to their network, because they knew and they understood how the programs and how the staff were really committed to the mission of the organization. So we have to understand what the passion and what the why is behind each board member. And if they can't answer it, then I think it's a deeper conversation that we need to have, is that every board member should have either an emotional connection or a pride connection to the organization, that they're proud of the work that they're doing. So let's go to the next slide. So one of the things that we make sure that to talk about is, as a board member, or if you as the ED are looking to really build solid committees, that you're looking for the right people to really engage during the fundraising process, is ask them what their strengths are. We see so many times that because somebody comes from a bank, that they're like, great, you're going to be the treasurer. And sometimes bankers are like, I do that during my day job. I don't want to do that in this. So it's like, maybe they want to be a part of events. Maybe they want to come up with creative ideas. So align the strengths of the individual board member to the functions that really drive the fundraising efforts. So we all have outgoing or sales individuals, or what we call woo. So if anyone's familiar with Clifton Strengths, woo is the strength that's winning others over. So your extroverts, the ones that love to tell stories and make those connections. Sometimes we have introverts. Introverts are fantastic to say, you know what, let me do some research, or let me introduce you to my trusted network, which is small, but it's mighty. Figure out ways to engage them. Maybe they have operational excellence, that they love to help build what needs to happen behind the scene. Or you have somebody who's incredibly organized. We love these people. The people who are like, you want a plan? I'll build you a plan. And those are the people that take charge of it and are detail oriented and really can run with it. Those that are gracious and appreciative. So how do we continue to talk with heart about what the organization is doing and how we're impacting our community? We have a lot of folks that talk to us about that they like to do event planning, that maybe they have experience doing that within their day job, or it's something that's a passion. So being able to leverage them, especially for all of you smaller organizations, you don't have time for that. So making sure that you're leveraging people within the board to be able to do that. Some of the other examples are, people who are great writers. So Wendy talked about making the phone calls, but maybe sometimes it's writing a really meaningful note saying, your money helped contribute to a new program that we started. These are how many, individuals that we served, and this was the outcome. And then it's always great to have a videographer, somebody who can capture all of the awesomeness that's happening. But these are conversations I think we're missing. So, when we get together, when we recruit for the board, and then even when we're talking about where the finances are and what needs to happen, who are the right people on the board or the volunteers, or maybe you have different committees where they don't need to be on the board, but make sure that you know what their strengths are, take inventory, and then align them to the work that you're doing. So, Wendy and I talk about running a nonprofit as a team sport. You can't use I language. It has to be, we're all small but mighty. So, it's a team sport. So, nobody likes to run alone. If you have a running partner, you have accountability. So if we move on to the next slide. So what we talk about quite a bit is the fact that we need to look at building organizations that are truly run on collaborative leadership. And when we talk about collaborative leadership, it's inclusive leadership mindset that gathers input and ideas from all of the different sources before making decisions and taking action. We are not telling you that you need to go to the board with everything. But once you have formed your ideas, your strategy, the things that you really think are going to have high impact, that's when you want to take that and have the conversations with the board chair or maybe with the entire board and get feedback, get input, see where they want to be actively involved. So you heard Wendy say move from us versus them language to we. So this is the team mentality, always working together. And so this takes time. It takes building trust and open communication. So the best place to start with that is we all have to have clarity. How many of us have had conversations with board members where we thought we were super clear, we walked away, you come back to the next board meeting and you say, how did this thing work out? And they look at you and say, "Oh, I thought you meant this." So then that we have frustration, we have misalignment. So when we talk about having clarity, it's talking about the expectations and responsibilities. Who's going to own it? And what does success look like, or what does progress look like? And so having those specific conversations. The way to do that is lots of communication and transparency. So it's not like we have our board chair on speed dial, but we might have regular touch points. Some might be more formal or informal, and just making sure that there's always the transparency of, hey, this is where I'm delivering on what we talked about. This is what I need from the board. And if we're communicating regularly and we're creating that transparency, there's a high level of trust and respect that happens across roles. And you don't have it when people start to micromanage you in a board meeting and they get stuck in the weeds, like how many paper clips did you buy? And, all of that. And that's a really unproductive conversation. You know that there's high levels of trust where the executive director can share and the board members show support and also thank them and appreciate what's happening. So this all sounds hunky-dory until we talk about the time and effort that it takes to put it in place. Is we use the phrase sometimes you have to slow down to go fast. And so, if you invest in the relationships, if you focus in on your recruitment, your retention, and honing in on the key areas that the board contributes around fundraising, what you'll see is that people will know how to contribute. They'll know how to best support the organization to reach its mission. And let's face it, along the way, There's going to be mistakes, there's going to be misunderstandings. I think all of us have done fundraisers or tried fundraising in some form or fashion where at the end of it, you're like, yeah, we're not going to do that again. So feedback is super important about the experience, the outcome, and the effort. I think a lot of the things that we do has a lot of effort. So here are the three important ingredients that we talk about for success. So if you have the great relationship between board and staff that's based on that trust and those shared expectations, it really helps you have a more strategic conversation about how the board is involved in fundraising, and then what are they doing and who is doing it. The clear strategy that ties it back to the mission, vision, and impact, and that's created through the consistent communication and feedback that we talked about. And that strong leadership skills, you can never put it on cruise control. So it's always about having those regular touch points. So once you feel like you have a trusting relationship, that's not where you turn and say, listen, we're not going to talk anymore on a monthly basis. We're going to go back to a quarterly. That doesn't work. So it's like finding what works based on where you are in the cycle of fundraising within your organization. So it's a regular investment. So we talk about the running partners on a mission. And so one of the other piece that we want to talk about is to develop running partners, you have to have courage. And so we call this courageous leadership. Um, there are definitely moments where we have to tell or present that the board is not meeting expectations, that they're not helping the organization. Maybe sometimes it's just one or two board members. So we talk about courageous leadership to be able to tell the truth, to call out the hard things, and then lean into the discomfort of building that relationship. There's always missteps when there's growth. And I want to share a story that actually just happened last week. Wendy and I were working with an organization and we did their first board retreat ever. They've never come together and they never met in person. And the executive director came to us really anxious about having it because she said, not only do we need to sort of level set and talk about like what the board needs to be for the organization, but we are in financial trouble. You know, there's only, I think she said that there was like $16,000 left in the account. So through the training, she had the courage to turn to them and say, I can't do this alone. That, this is, and she talked about how they got there. And a lot of these board members were not looking at the financials. They were not paying attention to what was being shared before the board meetings. And so that entire training session that we did turned into them recognizing and owning, you're right, we haven't been good partners. And from that, we've received, I think, 4 emails since then about a committee that was formed, individuals who are now rallying around and finding other really strong partners and short-term solutions to a much larger challenge. But if this executive director didn't have the courage to say, we're in trouble, and that we're in this place, that conversation wouldn't have happened, and they would have had to fold. So that's the type of courage that we're having, that we're talking about, is being able to have those conversations. And I want you to think about like all of the great relationships that you have in your life. You know that there's always that moment where we have a misstep, where we either upset each other, we disappoint each other. You know, if those relationships are meaningful, we'll lean into that and have the courage conversation to be able to say, listen, this isn't working, or we need to change the way that we're engaging. So nobody likes to do that, but it has to happen. So we want to talk about the 6 tips to get your board fundraising. And so much of this is, taking the framework that Wendy laid out for you and making sure that they understand the holistic view of what it means to serve on a board. And then this is about the relationships. This is about being able to invest in each person, understand their strengths and boundaries, And sometimes this doesn't need to be you. It can also be the board chair that leads this and says, I'll have conversations with the board members to understand who they are and what they want to contribute. The next is having clear expectations and discussing them. So this could be a board job description. This could be being able to, at the end of your meetings, having almost like a tickler file that says, this is the action that we discussed. This is who said that they were going to own it. This is what they're going to do. And then this is when they're going to report out on what happened. It's also about education, making sure that they're good ambassadors and storytellers. We want to make sure that they're consistent in what they say and how they say it out to the public. We also want to make sure that they're equipped to have the right tools that they need to fundraise their way. So another example that I'll use is we had one gentleman who sat on a board who flat out said to us, I don't have the money to contribute to the board. Like, I don't have that type of money, and he was a salesperson. So Wendy and I worked with the board. We worked with him, sat him down, and said, "Well, what's comfortable for you? What are the ways that you feel like you could rally people around fundraising?" So he was a big golfer. So he basically took a bunch of folks golfing. I think it was like 6 guys. And all he did during the time that they were golfing is talk about some of the success stories of what the organization was doing and how it impacted the kids. And in one afternoon, in 4 hours, he raised $16,000. So when we talk about equipping them, it's allowing them to identify ways that are authentic to them to be able to do it, and let them come up with creative solutions as well. Our job as leaders within the organization is to support and motivate. What are the tools that they need? We can check in, we can hold them accountable and motivated, and sometimes that's in partnership with the board chair. Provide opportunities for all of them to compare notes, make sure you talk about it in every meeting about, the great wins, the appreciation of effort, or the next steps. And treat your board as you treat your donors. Show appreciation and that stewardship are key. Now, we know that this takes time and effort, and in most organizations, you're small. So pick the things that you know are going to have high impact. Maybe you don't do all 6 of these, but maybe there are certain ones that really work for your organization. So pick what your priority is. Also celebrate the things that you're already doing, because none of you are doing this from scratch. And just look at how it's going to best serve your organization.
Wanted to thank Steph and Wendy for the presentation today, and I also wanted to thank you all for attending. I did also want to say if there's anything MonkeyPod can do to support your work, whether that we've got tools for managing your board, we've got tools for fundraising and keeping track of your donors, as well as keeping track of your finances. So if you're interested in learning anything more about that, please get in touch. We'd love to work with you and learn a little bit more about your mission. And yeah, Wendy, Stephanie, and how can folks get a hold of you if they'd like to work with you a little bit more?
Nonprofit Sidekick is the name of our company, and my email is Wendy@Nonprofit Sidekick. And Steph's is Steph@nonprofitsidekick.com. We are not a nonprofit ourselves. We're a small business. We also have an online community that is free to join, and you can find it from our website. It's on Mighty Networks, and we have nonprofit professionals in there. We have consultants in there. And we occasionally do like a training like this in there, but it's a good space to just kind of ask questions and learn from your peers as well.
Well, thank you all again. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any additional questions. And as I mentioned, we'll send this recording out to everybody after the fact as well, so that you can take a second look at it, as well as a copy of the slides. But thank you all for giving us some time this afternoon, and hope to chat with you more soon.